Hello friends, I'm Dr. Vineet Aggarwal. A very happy Mahashivratri to all of you. On this auspicious occasion, I thought of doing this video because there are a lot of misconceptions regarding the worship of the Shiva Linga. A lot of people mistakenly believe that the worship of the Shiva Linga is actually akin to the phallus worship which was prevalent in some of the primitive tribes all over the world. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. Except for the tantric traditions, the lingam and the yoni worship has nothing to do with the male or female procreative organs. Ling in Sanskrit actually means mark. If you have studied any of the Indian languages, you would remember pulling and istriling, which denote the masculine and the feminine forms of words. So the ling actually per se does not refer to any specific procreative organ, but is rather the mark of a deity. Shiv Ling is then the mark of Shiva, and it is an iconic representation of Shiva which does not show him or depict him in the usual manifestations that we imagine him as. Shiva has multiple names, Triambakeshwar, Neelkant, which denote certain properties related to him. But Shiv Ling does not dwell on any of these usual representations or the usual connotations that are associated with Shiva. So the Shiv Ling actually is the most basic representation of God, which does not attempt to conform the idea of God to how humans see him. The concept of the Shiv Ling actually comes from the Atharva Veda. The hymn 7 of book 10 refers to the skambh or the cosmic pillar and describes it in the following way. Which of his members is the seat of fervor? Which is the base of ceremonial order? Where in him stands faith? Where holy duty? Where, in what part of him is truth implanted? Out of which member glows the light of Agni? From which part proceeds the breath of Matariswan? From which does Chandra measure out his journey, travelling over Skambh's mighty body? Which of his portions is the earth's upholder? Which gives the middle air a base to rest on? Where in which member is the sky established? Where has the space above the sky its dwelling? This particular verse is talking about the axis of the universe, which is the primal skambh or the pillar around which the entire creation manifests. The same idea was further developed in the Purans, which came later. And in the Shiv Puran, we find this idea completely developed into the Shiva Lingam. The story again begins with a primal cosmic pillar of fire that emerges while Brahma and Vishnu are engaged in a debate about which of them is greater. Brahma decides to take the form of a swan and flies up high in the sky to find out one end of this cosmic pillar, while Vishnu takes the form of a boar or a varah and he digs deep down to find the other end. By mutual agreement, they decide that whosoever finds the end of this cosmic pillar would be considered the greater amongst the two, and the other person has to bow in front of his might. So now this may sound like a very childish story amongst two mighty gods, but we have to remember that these stories were a way to teach lessons, moral important lessons to people about humility and about not being filled with pride, even if you are the greatest. So continuing with the story, what happens? While Brahma and Vishnu try to find their own specific endpoints, there is none in sight for either of them. Vishnu, being an honest person, comes back to the middle point and accepts his defeat. But Brahma is not ready to do so. He takes the help of a falling meteor and convinces him to give evidence that Brahma indeed had found the upper end. When Brahma says so, Vishnu accepts his defeat and bows in front of Brahma. And it's then that Shiva emerges from this cosmic pillar of light, berating Brahma for his lies and equating Vishnu with himself. And this is the time when Shiva actually curses Brahma that because of his lies, he would not be worshipped anywhere in the world. That is one of the reasons you don't find any temple dedicated to Lord Brahma in India except for Pushkar. So this story actually shows us the true meaning of the Shiva Lingam. This pillar of fire is an iconic representation of God, which in Shiv Puran, the supreme God being Shiva. And this particular representation of Shiva is known as the Ling Udbhav Shiva. It is because Shiva emerged as the pillar of fire that we have the practice of putting water on Shiva Lingam, or milk, which is supposed to have cooling properties. Once we know the story of emergence of Shiva as a pillar of fire, the other aspects of his worship also start to make sense. Shiva is many a times worshipped with the bale fruit and with thandai, both of which are supposed to have cooling properties and are variously used in summer months amongst Indian masses. So the concept of the Shiva Lingam began from the pillar of fire, which was first described in the Atharva Ved and followed up in the Shiv Puran. And it has nothing to do with phallus worship, which is a false belief. So on this special occasion, go ahead and worship the Lord in his favorite form without any inhibitions in your mind. Om Namah Shivaye.